Greetings all. Welcome to Aquarian Diary. I'm your host, John Irving. It is February 11th, 2024. There are a lot of major changes occurring right now astrologically and over the next couple years. We're going to have Neptune changing signs. We're going to have Uranus changing signs. We're going to have Saturn changing signs. Pluto changing signs alone is huge. And so this is a really good time to get a lay of the land before these things happen with your own personal astrology. I know from a lot of people I'm talking to that there are major changes taking place. Often, as expected, people tend to request readings when major things are happening that they don't understand. But I would highly encourage you to be proactive and get a reading beforehand so that you have some mental preparation for what might be coming up. It can be extremely helpful. You don't want to leave it to the last minute. And I do have a special going on right now for readings. Today I'm going to be talking about some near-term astrology. I'm going to look at most of the major shifts that occur between now and the equinox. That's March 19th or 20th, depending on where you live. For my calculations, I'm using the Eastern time zone, and I'm in the Northern Hemisphere. I have Pisces in the 12th, and so Saturn is transiting my 12th house now. And the 12th house, which I've talked a lot about here before, can involve very challenging energies, because in the case of Saturn, for me, it is finishing up a cycle of 28, 29 years. The end of cycles always brings endings, because we are about to begin a new cycle. So while Saturn has been transiting my 12th, it has been making these challenging aspects to numerous points in my natal chart. But then recently I was talking to a few people, and other people were expressing that they've found this period recently very hard. And then I thought, well, maybe it's not just entirely me. Plus, we recently had the shift of Pluto into Aquarius on January 20th, which brings us out of that Pluto in Capricorn energy, which is very hard because Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, and Saturn is not easy or fun or light. You would naturally expect that the energies would be lighter. And in some ways, they have been. I myself have noticed that kind of on the intuitive and psychic and spiritual levels, the energy is faster and higher. But on the material plane, it feels kind of dense. And I think what's happening here is that we went through this period of Pluto in Capricorn, which was, and still is in some ways, very traumatic, frightening, and disturbing. And I've had the experience before when, after going through a very stressful, challenging period, you kind of go through a decompression, and you've been on edge and in a state of anxiety for a long time. You're almost like in a state of exhaustion. And there's grief, and there's still lingering fear and trepidation and stuff like that. Now, one of the important things I want to say about this is that with Pluto under the right circumstances can give certain people a lot of power. But there's also a catch to it. If you abuse that power, it will eventually boomerang upon you. And I did a whole episode on that, subtitled A Karmic Reckoning. Most really powerful people in the world have strongly placed Plutos. And if you look at them, a lot of them eventually do have a very dramatic comeuppance or fall from grace. But that may not happen immediately as soon as, say, for example, Pluto shifts into Aquarius. We have to go through this period of reorientation, and then the energies have to kind of settle, and we have to get into a new momentum before things really start moving forward. I anticipate that a lot of people, organizations, and groups are going to have a karmic comeuppance over the next year or two, and probably starting in 2024. We have one more period where Pluto will retrograde back into Capricorn from September 1st until November 19th of 2024. So we're not quite out of the woods yet. And remember, Capricorn rules those power structures that are part of our reality. So watch over the next year or two, or maybe even 3, I expect to see that there will be a lot of falls from grace, so to speak. Now we also have Saturn transiting Pisces, for the most part through February of 2026. And this is also a karmic cycle. I did an episode on this, and the subtitle of that was Reality Check. This is where we have to get really real about our illusions, delusions, ground our spirituality, and clear up any outstanding karma before we begin a new cycle when Saturn moves into Aries. A lot of this kind of stuff happens on the internal level or on the psychic or intuitive levels. Contrary to what a lot of people believe, there is a huge amount of what is happening here on Earth that is actually happening in non-material dimensions as well. And given my recent experiences with my own Saturn transits as it goes through my 12th house, I will have a lot more to say about that soon, but I'll leave that for another episode. So let's look a little bit at some of the near-term events. I posted on my community tab Friday night about the fact that the moon will conjunct Saturn February 10th, because I wanted people to know a little bit about that. And then I also stated that the moon would move into Aries on Monday morning, local time, and that should put a bit of a spring in people's step. I just wanted to give people a little sense of timing. But there's more to this, because we're going to also have the sun transit Pisces from February 18th. And this is a very internalizing period as well. The sun is going to be in Pisces, where Saturn is transiting now. And it's easier to understand this in the northern hemisphere, but this is kind of like the deep of winter when we go inwards, we lay low, we regenerate, we recuperate, we process everything that's happened in the past year. It's very introspective. And it's also more of a dreamy time, too. It's a good time for doing creative things, for doing spiritual work, for doing forms of divination, for renewal and regeneration, for letting go. Because when the sun moves into Aries, we get very busy. And we need the energy that we can recoup and rejuvenate with during this cycle. So it's also a period of endings, because it's the end of an annual cycle. It's best not to have a lot of external pressures or stress, if it's possible, during this time. Ideally, you're laying in bed and you're reading a book. You're taking it easy. You're doing self-care. That's what this period is really about, or that's how it's best to get through it. If you're a creative person, like I said, that energy can be wonderful too, because you can channel energies and thoughts and ideas that are very tapped into the zeitgeist. The 12th house is very much tapped into the global unconscious. But it's not associated with going out and, doing things like weightlifting or something, or highly strenuous activities. I'm not saying that you shouldn't exercise. You probably should, but be easy on yourself. And let's look at a few other key points here along the way. If any of these transits or events are very near or in strong aspect to any of your personal planets or key points, you may want to study them in more detail. I will be publishing a transcript of this on my website, which I do typically these days. If you want to go through and extract specific dates or information, you can do it there. I will usually put the transcript up within an hour or so of publishing the episode. First of all, no retrogrades. That's notable. It's a bit unusual. This means that things are going to be moving forward very quickly, whether we realize it or not. And it may feel like time is sped up a bit. On February 14th, Mars will conjunct Pluto at the 1st degree of Aquarius. Mars combined with Pluto are one of the more dangerous aspects in astrology. This is probably a good time to stay home and not do anything risky or dangerous or put yourself in dangerous situations, or places for that matter. We may also see some events take place in the world that involve a lot of violence or warfare or something like that, because those two energies together are very intense. The power of Pluto and the aggressiveness and warlike energy of Mars. This is brief. This is just probably from the period of around February 12th to 16th. Then on February 16th, Venus enters Aquarius. This will help lighten all of this heavy energy a bit and bring a bit of that love energy of Venus, that softer energy of Venus, into social concerns. I'm moving fairly quickly because of time. On February 18th, the Sun enters Pisces. On February 19th, the North Node will conjunct Chiron at 1645 of Aries. I'm not going to get into a huge explanation of Chiron here, but it has to do with wounding and in this masculine energy of Aries and the North Node amplifying those energies. This is kind of reflective of what I have been talking about people experiencing. There's always grief and trauma and pain associated with Chiron. On February 22nd, Venus conjuncts Mars at 657 of Aquarius. This can be kind of great sexual energy. If that matters to you, it's the masculine and the feminine coming together. On February 23rd, Mercury enters Pisces. That amplifies this Pisces energy I've been talking about that is emphasized during this period. On February 24th, there's a full moon at 5 degrees 23 minutes of Virgo. On the same day, Venus will square Jupiter in Taurus, both at 10 degrees 30 minutes. On the 27th, Mars will square Jupiter at 10:52. Venus and Mars square Jupiter basically really ramps up their energy. There's the potential for people to go overboard, for things to be over the top. And so just watch that you don't do things that later on you go like, oh, what was I thinking, or why did I do that? Because the energy can be very exaggerated and not necessarily in a contained way. On February 28th, Mercury will conjunct the Sun. That brings the mind and the being very closely together. The identity of the two kind of become one, almost indistinguishable for better or worse. On the same day at 9:46 of Pisces, the Sun will conjunct Saturn. So this period of around the 27th, 28th of February is probably going to be a little period where things feel a little bit more challenging, or we feel limited, or like we can't just do what we want to do. We might have to deal with things like responsibilities or duties, or attend to affairs we'd rather not attend to. And it's not a great time for doing expansive things. It's a better time for focus and concentration. This is generally not a fun energy. So around the 27th, 28th, 29th, just be prepared for a bit of that heavier, more responsible and duty-oriented energy. So then we're kind of in the clear a bit until March 8th, where Mercury conjuncts Neptune at 27 degrees of Pisces. This can be a very creative and dreamy kind of energy involving our minds and how we think and communicate. But just be aware that whatever you're thinking or doing at that time may not be particularly grounded and or even based in reality. So it's a great time for doing something like writing a science fiction novel or writing poetry, but it's not a good time for being pragmatic or making significant decisions around things like money or signing contracts, because you'll probably find out later on that it wasn't based in reality. Also, communications can be a little muddled or confused at this time as well. On March 9th, the next day, the Sun will sextile Uranus. This is kind of a good energy if you want to shake things up or introduce ideas or thoughts that take you outside the boundaries of the status quo. That's happening at 1951 of Pisces and Taurus. On March 9th, Mercury enters Aries. This is the beginning of a new cycle for Mercury. Mercury kind of comes out of that dreamy, fantastical Piscean energy and into the energy of Aries, which is all about doing things and starting things and being bold and self-assertive. It's kind of like going from neutral into overdrive very quickly with mind and communication type things. On March 10th, there's a new moon at 20 degrees of Pisces. If this new moon hits a personal planet very closely, it can be quite significant. New moons are about the very, very beginning stages of new cycles and new beginnings. On March 11th, Venus enters Pisces, where it is exalted. This means that the energy of Venus really likes to be in Pisces. And it is a wonderful time for self-care, enjoyment, a bit of self-indulgence, creative expression, embodying very loving kind of energy. Venus rules love, and love can be very easily expressed in this Piscean energy because there's very few boundaries. That's one of the downsides, is that you have to be careful with your boundaries in the 12th house. But this is overall a lovely energy, especially for the things that I've already described Pisces being beneficial for. On March 17th, the Sun conjuncts Neptune at 27-21 of Pisces. Similar to the Mercury conjunct Neptune transit I already talked about a few minutes ago, with Sun-Neptune aspects, we can lose our sense of identity. These things happen every year. These aren't necessarily life-changing transits I'm talking about here. But just be aware that one can kind of lose themselves a bit when the Sun conjuncts Neptune, say from March 16th to the 18th. It'd be a great time for doing spiritual work, or dissolving egoic attachments, or completely revising or revamping one's sense of identity. But this isn't typically a good transit for getting things done. It's not about work, work, work. It's just about being, and like I said, maybe tapping into the higher dimensions. It's not about physical vitality and energy. If you're at all intuitive or psychic, with the Sun and other planets transiting Pisces, we tend to be more open psychically during this time. Myself, I have a daily energetic hygiene regimen that I practice, and I just want to make this comment that it's probably a good idea to be doing something like that to protect yourself energetically, simply because we are just more vulnerable, we're more open psychically during this time. On March 19th, the Sun enters Aries, and this is the beginning of a new cycle. So don't expect things to happen instantly, but you'll feel the vitality of the Sun as it moves into Aries, and it's a great time to start things, or to start implementing things, or taking action. In the world at large, things should start picking up steam. The gist of all this is that energies and things are really going to start picking up and moving forward in an active way come March 19th. So we shouldn't be expecting too much of ourselves between now and then. If you're creative, if you're an artist or a musician or a writer, this could be a fantastic time for those kinds of activities. Or if you're involved in spiritual activities, or if you do things like divination, absolutely. Just do your best practices for staying grounded and keeping your energy clear. One more comment on all of this. There's an awful lot of calculations I made here. If it turns out that any of them prove to be off or wrong, or I made a typo, I will make a note in the comments section or my errata page. I wouldn't be surprised if I screwed up somewhere, but we'll see. Again, for more detail, check the episode description for other episodes or articles that are related or that I mentioned. And if you're interested in a reading with me, I'll put a link to that as well. I have a 20% off special on currently. Many sincere thanks to everyone who supports me, especially my YouTube members. Thank you very much. Take care, all the best, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye for now.